Hello and welcome to another edition of On the Line Perspectives on Partition, a series of conversations organised by the Bloody Sunday Trust. Throughout this series, prominent people from diverse political, cultural and community backgrounds have been sharing their thoughts on one of the most significant and certainly one of the most consequential events in modern Irish history, the partition of the island 100 years ago this year. My name is Paul McFadden and our guest today is a woman, the daughter of immigrants from Southeast Asia who settled in Dublin before she was born. She is a well-known climate activist. She's the chairperson of the Green Party in the Republic. She was the first person of Chinese heritage ever called to the Irish bar. She is the Lord Mayor of Dublin, Councillor Hazel Chu. Lord Mayor, you're very welcome. And thanks very much. Thank you very much indeed for agreeing to talk to us on this series. As well as being the first person of Chinese heritage ever called to the Irish bar, you're also the first non-white person ever to become Lord Mayor of Dublin. I think you've crashed through so many glass ceilings, you almost should be wearing a hard hat at this stage.
It was all accidental as well, not really planned, and this is the problem. So, but yeah, my head kind of hurts. No, it's been luck, Paul. There's a lot of luck involved in a lot of these things. So, but thank you.
A lot of luck, a lot of study, a lot of hard work as well. Let's not minimize that either. I just wonder, has your background, your ethnic provenance, has it ever been in any way a barrier to your progress in life, politically, in career terms, academically, at any point?
It has, in fairness. I think a lot of people who say it doesn't wouldn't have, I guess, maybe haven't felt it firsthand, but a lot of people I know that come from an ethnic minority background and come from an immigrant background would have always said that some point, it may not happen all the time, but some point in their life, they felt that there was a bit of a barrier due to their background. And in my case, I remember very distinctly someone in King's Inns, which is where I trained to be a barrister, had said to me, and it was someone within the workings of the institution, had kind of said, well, like, people from you really don't normally become barristers. And it was that kind of line of, oh yeah. And when I challenge on the whole, what do people like me mean? Is it because I'm from Fairhouse? Is it because I work in a restaurant part-time to pay my school fees? Or is it because very blatantly that, well, I look the color I am? And they quickly dismissed it and kind of went the other way then. So, and it happened again, I think, during politics, where a lot of people would say that I shouldn't be in this role because of the color that I am, or that I'm here because it's tokenism to the various movements that's happening in terms of fighting racism. And up to those people, I just say, no, anyone from any background, from any origin should run for politics.
Yeah, I'd invite anybody who suggests that it's tokenism, invite them to try and go through King's Inns and become a barrister and see how quickly and how far they progress. But it is not a typical kind of story, and I wonder if your success in politics, I mean, I don't think it perhaps has surprised you, but I wonder, for example, has it surprised your mother, who will have had a different experience, of having come to Ireland and having settled in Dublin, having left Hong Kong? I mean, I'm guessing she must be astonished at your political ascent. Yeah, is she shocked?
Completely and utterly shocked. My mom, my dad, who went back to Hong Kong, my brother, my aunt even. My aunt still doesn't believe I'm Lord Mayor, mainly because of COVID, we haven't had any people into the house. We haven't had any events. We haven't had any family in. So she thinks I'm making this all up. So like, her point is that until she gets to see the house and me in the office, she doesn't believe it. Whereas my mom has seen me in the office, and the first time she saw me sitting here, so the first time she saw me with the chain actually around my neck, she kind of just looked at me, and next thing you know, she just burst into tears. And I was there going, oh my God, what did I do now? Because I'm one of those people who always seems to upset their mother for some strange reason. But she was, I think she just was shocked. Her thing was, like, she came over here with nothing in the 70s because at the time, Hong Kong was going through a recession, and she came over here to find a better life for herself. And she met my dad over here then, who also came over to Ireland to find a better life for himself. And between the two of them, if anyone had ever said to them, your daughter will become the first citizen of Dublin, they would have just laughed at them, because for them, for my mum especially, she was just trying very, very hard to fit in, and she was trying very hard to integrate into society, to be included. And because there was the language barriers, because she didn't have a job, when she did get a job, she was a dishwasher, so she didn't meet many people, because there was these barriers for her of being part of society. To have then someone tell her that your daughter will be the first citizen is like very far-fetched. Even now, I think she finds it really hard to believe, because in a way, it's showing someone, well, listen, no matter what background you come from, you can do it. Like at one point, there was 9 of us. There was myself, my aunt, my uncle, my mum, my dad, and my cousins, all living in a 3-bedroom house in Fir House. And none of them would have known anything about politics. So to have someone within the family that goes on to do something in politics, I think would have been just something they wouldn't have thought of.
And your mother has become a very successful businesswoman, hasn't she?
She has.
You know,
I'm very proud of her for that.
yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I'm all for, I mean, saluting the achievements of Irish mothers. Chinese mothers in this instance deserve some kind of salute as well, I think, you know.
Very much so. Like she started off as a dishwasher and a cleaner, and then they saved up enough to buy a chip van. It was all very Roddy Doyle. People tell me it was a chip van, and then they managed to lease their own takeaway, and then they bought a takeaway, and then they opened a restaurant. And even after my parents split up, my mum continued. And at one point, she had 4 restaurants and managing 100 staff. And again, back to the whole, like her mum. And when we talk about mums and their pride and disbelief, her mum didn't believe, because her mum was all the way over in Hong Kong still, didn't believe that her daughter was managing 4 restaurants and 100 people. Because again, my granny would have been a trader in the market. She sell bananas. She also broke rocks in the local rock mine as a second job. So she wouldn't have had any thought that her daughter would do well. And I wish to God that she got to see me in this role, because I don't think she would have ever believed that her granddaughter could be in this role.
Well, you know what? I mean, I think in the course of this conversation, we'll find out that for all your, you know, considerable achievements, all is not rosy in the garden in the Republic. I mean, and I know you've been actively involved in stuff, and we'll talk a wee bit about that. But this series of conversations, it's about partition, it's about the border. I just wonder, at what point in your life, you were born in 1980, you're a lot younger than me. At what point, that was the year of the first hunger strike, actually, the IRA hunger strike here in Northern Ireland. At what point did you become aware of you know, the existence of another jurisdiction on this island, of the existence of the border, of the existence of Northerners?
It was very much later on, and it's funny, Paul. Well, firstly, you look quite young. So, and secondly,
It must be the bad reception.
but secondly, I like, because we grew up in a household that main aim was survival, was to make sure there was food on the table, to make sure that people got to work, got to school. There wasn't talk of politics. There wasn't talk of anything outside the home. And I remember the first time I really heard of it was when I was back in Hong Kong. I was quite young. We were making trips back to Hong Kong to my granny, and a neighbor of my granny said, "Oh, you're from Ireland. There's a lot of troubles going on there." I was there going, "No, Fir House is lovely." So, and like they were there going, "No, up in the north, like there's a lot of trouble. Like take care of yourself." And like it didn't really occur to me, and I was all of like, I think 6 or 7, not completely oblivious. So I asked my mom then, and my mom, who had friends who lived in Belfast, started to explain that there were troubles up in the north, that there's partition, and that she tried to explain it in a very kind of a simple way, because again, as a child, it's hard to absorb. Sometimes it's hard to absorb these things. So she explained it as best as she can, and in a way, I guess she didn't quite understand it either. So, but she, coming from Hong Kong and having some history of kind of British rule. She kind of learned a lot herself and picked up a lot of herself and talking to her friends. So that was my first I guess knowledge of what was going on. And then in school I would have asked my teachers, because I was curious on the whole, well, how did this happen and what happens now? And my main, at the time I was all of the 6-7-year-old me was very concerned on things like, what happens to the children? Like, what happens with school? How do people interact? And like, do they play with each other? I had all these questions, and that was my first kind of I guess learning of anything from to do with Northern Ireland.
And now, I mean, having attained you're about 40 years of age, you've been involved in politics. When you look at what's happening in Northern Ireland, the kind of disturbances we've seen in recent weeks, the upset that has been caused to people in the Republic as well as in Northern Ireland, and people in Britain and people in Europe over the issue of Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol and all of that. What are your impressions of this place, this part of this island?
My impression is that it is ever changing, and that there are lots and lots of people that are working very hard and holding on. And then on top of that, there is also so much tension still. So, and I don't say this lightly, I think you and I discussed that at the start of this interview, is that this is not an area I'm very well versed in, and I'm very conscious that I don't say anything wrong, because this is a very emotive issue for a lot of people, for people who live there. And we talk about the partition, and and for a lot of people it's a huge loss. For a lot of other people, it was seen as a victory of preserving a way of life. And this is the thing. There's this split, and from the Good Friday Agreement, there's calls for parity of esteem and consent for any constitutional change, but the tension was still always there. And these, of course, were made worse by Brexit as well. And I think Brexit has made a lot of things worse on so many levels, but it's echoed that partition even more. So I think I, as someone down in the south looking at it, all I can think of is, what can we do to help? How can we build better relations? And I see this from a party level, that like I'm going to be speaking at the Green Party Northern Ireland conference this weekend, because to me, my neighbours and colleagues in the north are those people that I want to continue working with, and I want to support and learn more of. And the tensions and the disorientation and the loss that is there at the moment, I guess my main question is, how do we make it better? Maybe that's a really naive or idealistic question, but I do think that for every decade that has passed, there has been people that's just been trying to make things better. So while some things get worse, others are trying to push for just normality and a better way of life.
I think one of the things that we in this part of the world, are badly in need of is, well, we're in need of friends, and we're especially in need of critical friends, So I think people who can say sensible things to us and encourage us to go down a better road are doing us a great favour in this part of the world. You mentioned about the things in Northern Ireland as you perceive them are ever changing. That's an interesting phrase, because there are people here who really don't want change, certainly not dramatic change. What do you, given your background and your experience, what do you say to those who would hold on to, the old ways, the old shibboleths, all of that kind of thing? What do you say to people like that?
Well, this is the thing. I get why people don't want to change. Like, it's hard. Any change at all is hard, and it's hard to think, oh, my life is changing, my world is changing, and you're in that mindset. And it's already difficult enough with COVID, that there is this constant challenge for people, and to have then this extra, well, things need to change, then people, I can fully get where and understand where people will have the doubt and have the fear. But I come from a family and a background that always had to change, because of what, like, we came here as immigrants, and we had to adapt, we had to change to it. My parents had to change it. I grew up always kind of being told, well, you wouldn't get this far, you wouldn't get that far, because, well, people like you don't. I had to change to adapt, and every change I made in my life always caused me anxiety and fear. So, and but then I also know that that's progress as well. And I don't like, this is the thing, I don't want to come across sounding patronizing or condescending and telling people, oh, listen, be open for change, because it's very hard for me as an outsider coming in to say, hey, listen, it'd be great if you just change these things, because people don't want to see that. But at the same time, I would ask people to take one step back and look at what would the future be like, for not for them, but for the next generation. Because that's one of the reasons I got into politics. I could have entered politics 10 years ago or 20 years ago when I was in college, but I chose it now because, and I was in a well-paid job that I was happy with, was that I had a kid. And now it's all about what will it be like for the next generation. And the reason my mom came over here was to plan a better life for her next generation. So for the people in the north, I know it sounds cheesy, but I would ask, what is it that you want for your next generation? Don't think about you, and don't think about what changes you don't want to apply to your lives now. Think about what the next generation could be better, or how it could be better for them, and how you would like to see changes happen to make it better for them.
You describe yourself as an outsider, kind of looking under. You referred to that. I would remind you, Lord Mayor, that you are following in the footsteps of one of the most iconic figures in politics, and especially in the unionist psyche in Ireland, Sir Edward Kerson, whose statue dominates the approach to Parliament buildings at Stormont. He's a Dubliner like you. He had a career in law, like he went down that route. So you're well qualified in a number of regards to comment about the North in that situation.
That's high praise there, Paul. I'm not quite sure I can take it.
There may be a statue at some point to Stormont to a person by the name of Hazel Chu. Who knows?
Very little one.
But what is your impression of Northerners, of whichever political hue they are? What is your impression of us as a people?
That you're people. So I know that sounds kind of odd, but like like people come in all shapes and sizes, and different kind of mindsets. And I've gone up to canvas for Claire Bailey. I've got to meet some people, not a lot of people, and I know that people come in various shades in no matter which constituency or where you live. And anyone I've met in the north are lovely and warm people. So they may have different mindsets on where they stand in terms of partition, in terms of Northern Ireland as a whole. But at the end of the day, they're still really welcoming people. They're people. They're nice. So, and I think this is the thing. It's very easy for people to stand firm and to hold on to their beliefs, because that's what they've always had in their mind and in their hearts. But a lot of times when people are willing to kind of stand aside and realize, listen, as a good of a society, we're just, as a person, I'm the same pretty much as my neighbor. I'm the same color, I'm the same background, I'm the same religion. Well, no, sorry, touching on, but like I share the same qualities and concerns. So you leave everything else and park everything else aside. Your people are just people. So, and I know that may be putting down in very simplistic terms, but it's what I argue when people throw issues about race at me as well, that we're all common people at the end of the day.
Yeah. You will be aware, of course, that the issue of a border poll is one that it's been ongoing in recent years in politics north of the border here in Northern Ireland. And if and when people are asked to express their views in that democratic test, they'll be weighing up things like the benefits of the NHS in the UK, which undoubtedly has served people in Northern Ireland incredibly well throughout the pandemic recently. But to be looking at the Republic as well, which is a pretty progressive place. It's cutting quite a dash, I think, in European politics. The economy prior to the pandemic was doing pretty well. But you wouldn't be suggesting that all in the garden is rosy in the Republic. I mean, very recently you've been campaigning, for example, about a woman who died in emergency accommodation. So all was very far from rosy in the garden in the Republic.
Anyone that claims their country is rosy, it like definitely needs to double take or definitely needs to question themselves. And you have this with a lot of countries in the world that claim, "Hey, we're the best at everything," or we're better at this." And I think going from my background, there's a big country that claims that all the time. But looking at looking at Ireland, we're not perfect. There's lots of issues. Like I just came from homeless task force meeting, and the homeless task force was something I set up in my term here, and it's transitioned into the housing SPC. And we were looking at the issues, and debts being one of them, and emergency accommodation, and allocation of space, and how there's so much more single people, especially single men, that are homeless now. And these are massive issues. Like we look at the vaccine rollout and the issues there. We look at lockdown issues. We look at from COVID point of view, there's been a lot of issues, but even before COVID, there's been housing issues. There's been issues when it comes to economy. So like we are looking into eye of a storm of perhaps a recession coming forward. What's the planning and precautions then? There's lots and lots that people can do better in. Does that mean we're the worst? Absolutely not. Does that mean we're the best? No, no way either. But when it comes to a border poll, this is the thing. No two people will have the same view. So there was always like north or south, they wouldn't have the same view. They might sometimes be aligned with someone on their view of what a border poll will look like, but everyone has slightly different perspective. And this is what we need to start teasing out. We need to start teasing out what are people's views on this and how will it work. And the only way we can do that is start talking about it and keep talking about it. And I know a lot of people go, oh, this is just talk. Why do we keep talking and not doing? Because talking and being able to come to the table is the way to prevent the issues that will come after that. So I'm all for action. I'm all for going in there and getting the job done. But when you don't have the necessary planning and precaution on such a serious matter, it doesn't really matter on the action then, because you need to try where possible to bring people along. Like, and you can see this with any conflict, with any divide in the past, is that when people don't feel like they've been brought along, views get even more entrenched. They deepen. And what we need right now is that it is a conversation to continue to happening, and like citizens assemblies, preparation and planning, like dialogue. That's what we need, and we need it now more than ever, especially after Brexit as well. We need to continue talking.
I mean, just on that point you make about people need to be brought along, I'm wondering what you would say to those in loyalist communities who feel particularly maybe left behind, and who are particularly upset about the outworkings of Brexit at the moment, who feel their Britishness is being diminished. What would you say to people who are in that position, who feel that their identity is being, almost being stripped away from them at present, and in some cases who are choosing to respond in a violent fashion? By no means a majority, or even not even a significant number of people who maybe feel like that, but a number who can, who can occupy news headlines and stuff like that.
I would say that there is always a better place. And I would say I'm sorry, because it is a very hard position to be in when you feel like your identity is being stripped away. And I know it's probably odd from a woman like me being able to, but saying that, but a woman like me is a woman that has parents who were immigrants, who had a very Chinese cultural identity, who is now born Irish and trying to find her own identity as well. I look in the mirror and I know what I look like, but in my heart and in my mind I'm Irish, yet loads of people will say I'm not. So it is that finding that identity, and I'm sure the same will happen to my daughter when she grows up, because she looks exactly like me. So I fully get where people come from when they feel like their identity is being taken away from them and they don't have a choice. But the choice is yours on whether to accept that there is a wider conversation going, that your identity that you have isn't just uh, isn't just the nationality, or isn't just a phrase that's put on you or a label that's put on you. It's what you choose to be, and what you choose to be may be what's good for all of society in Northern Ireland. And this comes back to my conversation about talking, because everyone has different views on what their identity is and what they want to choose to be, and whether they stay or not, whether they want to remain and make for better. And and a lot of it will be, well, what would the whole community become, and is progression a bad thing? And that's a lot to resolve within one person, and it takes a lot of time as well. And there's a lot of still holding on to the identity of, well, what was once was. And I guess my only thing from my point of view is, sometimes the change isn't as bad as we think, but a lot of the times it's not letting go of the change, because, or not letting go and thinking that change is going to be the worst thing possible. And it's also, a lot of people think of it as losing as well. Losing identity means they're lost, that they're gone as a person. That's not the case. Like, your identity and your nationality is really important, but at the same time, it's choosing to become, or choosing for a better society, is even more important. And this goes back to my point, and maybe I'm going off on a tangent here, but it goes back to my point of, what do you want the next generation to be? Like, what do you want the next generation to hold on to? Is it to hold on to the identity you've held on to for so long and continue to hold on to? Or do you want them to have something else that they're proud of, that they can work together with others with, and that they can build a better society out of? So, like, I don't mind if Alex chooses to be whatever she wants to be, or call herself whatever, as long as she works well with other people, and as long as people can accept her for who she is at the end of the day.
I want to ask you one final question. It's one that would apply to young Alex. It's one that applies to you. If a border poll happens in the fairly near future, within a generation or so, if a majority expresses a preference for there to be a united Ireland, for that constitutional change to happen, how would you, as a modern Dub, feel about the prospect of being united with people in this, many would say, dysfunctional part of the world, in this dysfunctional part of the island? How would you feel to have that landed in your lap as a citizen of the new modern Irish Republic?
I it's funny, because my first thing in my head was, that would be great. So and then
why the pause?
Cautious, Hazel. But this is the thing. I would like to see a united Ireland, but at the same time, I also understand the concerns, and I understand the fear from people. And I do not, at no point should things ever be forced. So, if it comes to the stage where people have decide by a majority that they want this to happen, then our job, so my job, if I was still in this world, which I probably won't be, because I think it'll take a long time to look at a border poll, is that whoever, like, my job as a member of society is to welcome it. It's to welcome that change. Like, no matter whether people like to think of it or not, the communities we live in is like a big family, and families are dysfunctional. Like, my family is really dysfunctional, but it doesn't mean you disown them. And this is the thing, like, our country as a whole is that. So, and maybe that's putting it in very simple terms, but we're not about to, or I'm not about to cut off people, or think that just because people are dysfunctional and that they should be gone, or that they don't belong. For me, anyone that is within this country belongs within this country and should be kept and worked with as a community. And we're not very functional sometimes either. That's the thing, Paul. As much as you say, oh, dysfunctional up north, we're not that functional down south either, as much as people love to think, oh, we're not. And maybe that's the happy marriage, that at this end of the day, that it's about bringing each other along, and it's about supporting each other and finding a better place. Maybe that's very hippie and idealist of me, but I like to think that. I like to think that in 20, 30 years' time, that we will be finding our footing, where our discourse and dissension and disagreements can be worked out, and that we will become a more united front, whether that's a united Ireland or not, be it that I have hopes that it can be. If people don't want it to be, that's another thing too.
For a woman who approached this interview with a considerable degree of trepidation, you've had a lot of views to share with us now. You've given us a lot of food for thought as well. So, Lord Mayor, I and the people of the Bloody Sunday Trust are very, very grateful to you for taking the time and the trouble to share your thoughts with us on Partition, to go on the line with us. And as I say, you've given us plenty to think about, so thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, actually. So thank you.